today's video, we're going to explore one of the most heartbreaking stories from Tolkien's legendarium that the movies only briefly touched upon. If you've ever wondered what actually happened to Arwen after Aragorn's death, prepare yourself for a tale that's both beautiful and deeply tragic. I'll be covering details that might surprise even devoted fans of the films, drawing from Tolkien's own writings to reveal the full scope of this love story's bittersweet conclusion. Most people who watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy remember Elrond's stern warnings about Arwen's choice to love a mortal man. But what many don't realise is just how prophetic those words would prove to be, and how the consequences extended far beyond what we saw on screen. The reality of Arwen's fate after becoming Queen of Gondor is more complex and sorrowful than most viewers imagine. First, let's establish something crucial that the movies don't make entirely clear. Arwen wasn't simply an elf who fell in love with a human. She belonged to a very specific category of beings in Middle-earth, known as the half-elven. This distinction is absolutely vital to understanding her story because it meant she faced a choice that most elves never had to make. The half-elven were descendants of unions between elves and men, and they possessed a unique gift that was also a burden. Unlike full-blooded elves who were bound to the fate of their people, or men who had no choice in their mortality, the half-elven could choose their destiny. They could either embrace immortality and sail to the undying lands with the elves, or accept mortality and share the fate of mankind. Arwen's choice to become mortal wasn't just a romantic gesture. It was an irreversible decision that would fundamentally alter her very nature. When she chose Aragorn, she wasn't simply agreeing to live a shorter life. She was choosing to bind her soul to the fate of men, which meant that when death came, she would go to the same afterlife as humans, not to Valinor where the elves dwell. This decision had profound implications that rippled through her entire family. Her father Elrond understood exactly what this choice meant, not just for Arwen during her mortal lifetime, but for eternity. By choosing mortality, Arwen would be forever separated from her elven kin, including her father after death. For over a century, however, this sacrifice seemed worthwhile. Arwen and Aragorn ruled together as king and queen, rebuilding the great kingdoms and ushering in an age of peace and prosperity. They had children, travelled their realms, and lived the life they had dreamed of during those dark days of war. But as Tolkien himself wrote, all mortal joy must eventually come to an end. Even the Dunedain, with their extended lifespans, cannot escape the fate that awaits all men. And when that inevitable moment arrived, Arwen would face the true cost of her choice in ways that would test the very limits of her strength. When Aragorn reached the age of 210, he began to feel the weight of his years pressing upon him. Unlike ordinary men who might succumb suddenly to illness or injury, Aragorn possessed the wisdom to recognise when his time was approaching. As one of the last of the Númenóreans, he had been granted not only a lifespan 3 times that of regular men, but also the grace to choose the moment of his departure, while still maintaining his dignity and strength. The conversation between the aging king and his beloved queen reveals the depth of their bond and the tragedy of their situation. Aragorn understood that if he waited too long, Arwen would witness his gradual decline into frailty and confusion. Rather than subject her to watching him waste away, he chose to depart while he could still do so with honour intact. Arwen's response to this decision shows us a side of her character that the films barely explored. Despite her wisdom and elven heritage, she found herself pleading with Aragorn to stay longer. For the first time in her long existence, she was experiencing the desperate fear of loss that comes with mortality. The immortal part of her nature rebelled against accepting this inevitable separation. After Aragorn's peaceful death, Arwen's transformation became complete in the most heartbreaking way possible. The woman who had once been called Evenstar, the fairest of her time, became a shadow of her former self. Those who had known her in the glory days of Gondor barely recognised the figure who now walked among them with dimmed eyes and a spirit heavy with grief. Her decision to leave Minas Tirith and abdicate her throne wasn't made in haste. She carefully ensured her children were prepared to rule without her, understanding that her presence as a grief-stricken queen would only burden the kingdom she had helped to build. This act of selflessness, even in her darkest hour, demonstrates the nobility that had always defined her character. The journey to Lothlórien represents perhaps the most poignant aspect of her story. She returned to the place where she had spent much of her youth, but found it empty and silent. Galadriel had already departed for the Grey Havens, and the Golden Wood that had once thrived under elven protection now stood abandoned. Arwen wandered these familiar paths like a ghost haunting the remnants of a vanished world. In those final months she truly became what Elrond had predicted, a shadow moving through the forests carrying within herself the accumulated sorrow of her choices. Her final resting place in Cerin Amroth holds deep symbolic meaning. This was the very hill where she had accepted Aragorn's proposal decades earlier, where their love story had truly begun. By choosing to die there, Arwen completed the circle of her mortal existence, returning to the moment when she first embraced the path that would lead to both her greatest joy and deepest sorrow. The tale of Arwen's fate after Aragorn's death reveals layers of tragedy that the movies only hinted at. Her story isn't just about a woman mourning her husband, it's about the ultimate price of love that transcends the boundaries between different races and destinies. She gave up eternity itself for a century of happiness, and in the end she faced that final year of wandering alone, carrying the full weight of what she had sacrificed. Tolkien crafted this ending to show us that even the most beautiful love stories come with costs that extend far beyond what we might initially imagine. Arwen's choice was made freely, but that doesn't make the consequences any less heartbreaking. Her father's warnings proved prophetic not because love itself was wrong, but because some decisions reshape the very fabric of existence. This deeper understanding of Arwen's story adds profound meaning to every scene she shares with Aragorn in the films. Knowing how it ends makes their moments together all the more precious and bittersweet.